This video is powered by, as always, entertainment. If you enjoyed this content, consider becoming a patron over on patreon.com/asalways for access to the Patreon exclusive podcast, The Kill Connor Clubhouse, early access to the Cinema Room podcast, being part of polls for future videos, and other early access material. With that said, please enjoy the video. One of my oldest topics from back in the day was which Assassin's Creed game is the best. A list ranking from worst to best, in my opinion. Yeah, my opinion. Not your opinion, my opinion. Oh, we've gone to a black screen? This really is like the old days. Hello? Hello? I've never really lingered here for long. Does this darkness just go on forever? Okay, let's just get back to the... Please let me know your thoughts on your lists in the comment section below. Please type paragraphs and paragraphs to your heart's content. I've done two of this video in the past. Once in 2015, just after the launch of Assassin's Creed Unity, and just after my channel had had the first growth spurt from 1,000 subscribers to nearly 10,000, and another time in 2016, just after the launch of Assassin's Creed Syndicate. I'll link both below if you're interested. Now, it's been almost 3 years since then. Even when I was a channel focused heavily on Assassin's Creed, I never thought to re-tackle this topic. Even when Origins released, I never decided to reorganize my list. Even when my opinions had changed greatly due to my reflection on the series, I never thought to reorganize my list. So I thought now might be the perfect time to revisit this topic and perhaps adapt it to other franchises in the future. And so without further ado, let us begin. This one is always somewhat controversial to state. People will accept Unity as your least favourite, or perhaps Syndicate, but whenever I tell people Assassin's Creed 3 is my least favourite, I'm normally met with a bit of confusion. I think to the average video game fan, Assassin's Creed 3 is one of the better games, and even amongst Assassin's Creed fans, Assassin's Creed 3 is seen as definitely one of the better games. It had social stealth, it had cities and a countryside, it had actual assassinations, Templars, hidden blades, a real playable modern day with the protagonist of Desmond Miles. How could this possibly be the worst Assassin's Creed game? There are a few reasons I see this as my least favourite of the franchise. To begin with, a few simple things. The setting is boring. I do not find the setting itself interesting to be in, or interesting to look at. To me, Assassin's Creed has always worked best the further back in history you go, and you can explore periods that aren't as well known about. On top of this, the setting is boring to look at too, with things being made up of mostly browns. With the setting as well comes the historical period. In Assassin's Creed 3, it feels more like an American Revolution game than it does an Assassin's Creed game, and that drags every single part of the game down, bar the first 3 sequences, in which it's far more story-based than history-based. Now, on top of this, I have so many criticisms. I could go on all day about how I'm not a huge fan of the Assassin's Creed 3, 4 Rogue combat system. The mission structure can be incredibly tedious, the side characters are all worthless and uninteresting, but my 2 main issues are with the character of Connor and the modern day. To begin with, Connor is probably the most hated character in the Assassin's Creed fandom. However, because of this, he's also the most vocally defended character. Now, for most people, the issue is with their ability to not be able to relate to Connor, or how Connor is monotone and boring. They're all valid critiques, but they aren't really the issues that I have, at least not quite. Yes, Connor can be monotone in his speech, but the issue is more so with the writing of his character. Connor is written very poorly. He starts the game as a naive child looking to join the assassins, protect his village, etc. And this works. I was fully on board with this and definitely felt I could relate to him. This is due to how he's written as a very noble and selfless child and teenager in the early stages. However, all of this is lost when he becomes an adult, because he's written in the exact same way. Only now he isn't a child, and he should no longer be this naive. But he is, and he continues to be every step of the way. Connor never changes, never adapts, and never grows as a person. He always makes the opposite decisions to ones that logically make sense, and he never sees the error of his ways and never tries to correct himself. And these are things that I despise about character writing in any medium, but it's never been more present to me than in Assassin's Creed 3. Connor's writing is wildly inconsistent, and to anyone who thinks critically about narrative whilst playing as opposed to just enjoying the action and the surface level of the narrative, they'll hate this. And and will constantly pick up on inconsistencies and issues in which Connor's character is written, and considering this is present for probably 65 to 70% of the game's main story, it drags anything that might have been good totally through the mud for me. The second major issue is with the modern day. Now, a lot of people are very confused at first when I bring up the topic of the modern day not being satisfactory. You're playing as Desmond, third person modern day, actual assassin missions. What is there not to like? Let me try to explain. Assassin's Creed 3 gives the illusion of a good modern day without delivering a good modern day. You play as Desmond, sure, but you aren't doing any of the things that made the modern day good. I never played the modern day of Assassin's Creed to do the same things my ancestor was doing but reskinned to look modern. That defeats the purpose of the modern day. I played the modern day to enjoy the tonal shift between the ancestor plot and the modern day plot. It almost felt like playing two different games. I loved the character interaction, the friendly banter, the intriguing plot devices, the optional dialogue, the exploration of historical locations from the present day, and all of these things are near to non-existent in Assassin's Creed 3. Instead, it's just a copy and paste of what Connor does in the Animus, but as Desmond. I actually made a video on this a while back talking about how Brotherhood is the pinnacle of the Assassin's Creed modern day, and why it truly hits the nail on the head as to what the modern day is meant to be. I'll link it below and on a card if you want to watch. Assassin's Creed 3 unfortunately misses all of these things, and for that, coupled with the points I raised before, that's why it's at number 11 on this list. Now at number 10, we have a game that either you love or you hate, and I struggle to know whether this game deserved to be number 10 or number 9, but I think this makes the most sense. Assassin's Creed Syndicate, when it launched, was a breath of fresh air. I remember finishing the game and thinking that things were finally looking up for Assassin's Creed, and I can't for the life of me figure out why that was. I guess because Unity came out the previous year and was such a nightmare that this seemed better, but in actuality, I feel Unity is a better game than Syndicate ever was. For a start, Syndicate feels very restrictive in terms of its gameplay. I said in my review years ago that it's almost like the game has you on training wheels for the entirety. Things like leveling being incredibly linear, same with the customization and crafting, along with the game physically not allowing you to jump off of buildings. The story itself is more competent than Assassin's Creed 3 with no major character inconsistencies, but that doesn't mean it's good. It's still very boring and bland that drags on for far too long and has pretty much the same structure each sequence. You play one interesting mission as Evie, you then play 6 boring missions as Jacob in which you fuck something up, and then you play one more mission as Evie in which you have to fix up Jacob's mess. There's never any major obstacles to overcome, there's never any interesting plot devices, just very basic and very bare bones. On top of that, it treats the audience like morons, having huge title cards for historical figures when you just happen to bump into them onto the street, and this coupled with the very over-the-top characters makes Syndicate feel like a parody of the Assassin's Creed franchise. By having historical figures just coincidentally being everywhere, or having the pieces of Eden very present and working in the most generic ways possible, it makes it feel as if Syndicate was intended to be a mockery of their own franchise, a bit of a joke at their own expense, pointing out all of the silly things that happen in every single Assassin's Creed game. But no, this game is very serious, and I can't take it seriously. On top of that, the side quests and borough takeovers are repetitive and boring, just like the main story missions, and none of it is memorable. The rope launcher is another big issue, but people will tell you, oh, well, you had to have the rope launcher because the buildings are too far apart. But then just don't set it where the buildings are too far apart. If you need a magic Batman grapple hook to traverse your Assassin's Creed world, you've set your game in the wrong setting. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is just one of those games that doesn't feel a part of the franchise it's based in, and unfortunately, it doesn't have the interesting story or gameplay to back it up and make it worth my time. Ah, the sweet, sweet sound of my intestines falling out. Sorry, I just don't like this very much. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is the newest entry into the Assassin's Creed series, and it really shouldn't be. No, really, why is this an Assassin's Creed game? A lot of you are probably wondering why this wasn't at number 11, so allow me to explain. This game suffers from the same issues as Syndicate, feeling like it doesn't belong in the franchise it's a part of, feeling drawn out, the side characters all feeling irrelevant and unimportant, and the tone being incredibly off and silly, making serious moments feel not serious and actually more funny than anything else. The lore is of course fucked too, and I made a whole video on that, which I'll again link below if you want to check it out. The writing of Cassandra or Alexios is not writing at all. In something like The Witcher or Mass Effect, where you have a pre-established character that you give dialogue choices, Those dialogue choices all need to feel like they're options that character would say. In The Witcher and Mass Effect, they do this very well, and the Paragon Renegade system options of Mass Effect allow you to build your own character progression using dialogue. In Odyssey, you can just choose one day to be a complete ass, another day to be a saint, another day to be a lying cunt, and another day to help out all the people of a town. There's no consistency and no consequence for your actions. You can play 30 hours as the hero of Greece and then suddenly decide to slaughter a town, and there's no consequences at all. You cannot tell me that's good writing. It makes everything you do feel pointless, because at the end of the day, every choice is pointless, and it's an illusion to make the game feel like an RPG, whereas it's just choices for the sake of choices, not choices for the sake of narrative. There's also issues with the combat and grinding. The enemies are damage sponges, and leveling up is a total chore. The world itself is so massive to travel across, it's half your playtime, and the naval is so mundane, I'd rather kill myself. The reason, however, this isn't lower on the list is because the game is so big and full of so much stuff that there will be moments in which you are having fun, and for me this was the case. The cultist system, for example, or just exploring and doing mini quests, things that felt open-ended and allowed you to quickly take part in and move on without the need for uninteresting and pointless dialogue choices, but just fun things I could do in the world, and that's why I just had to put it above Syndicate on my list. Music to my ears. Or is it? When Assassin's Creed Rogue first launched, I adored it, and I thought it was actually one of the very best of the franchise. But why was that? I feel one major reason is due to the familiarity of having Hatham, Achilles, Adewale, New York, the Homestead, etc., along with a story focused on something interesting as a concept in the precursor temples and the switching of sides to see the point of view of the Templars. Now these things are all still positives, but not in the same way I thought 3 years ago. The switching sides is more of an illusion than anything else. The Templars act like assassins, and the assassins act like Templars. It's not a true switching of sides, as you're doing the same thing regardless. Shay also isn't super interesting as a character. He's not terrible either, he's just sort of there. He's serviceable yet forgettable. The world, similarly to Assassin's Creed 3, suffers from the same issues I found in that game, being incredibly mundane and boring to look at. It doesn't suffer from the same issues in its historical period, but it also doesn't gain anything either, which isn't always an issue, as Assassin's Creed games work best when they're less focused on history and more on the story, which I think definitely helped Rogue. The gameplay itself is practically Assassin's Creed 4, but in my opinion, it's much worse given it's running on older tech. To me, Rogue is just very mediocre. It's not awful in my eyes, but it's not very good either. I can see where they were going with it, and I like the concept, it's just the execution I'm not a huge fan of. Sophia is a great studio, giving us things like Curse of the Pharaohs for Origins, and I'd love to see them be given more time and have another stab at a full AC title, perhaps with the rumoured Rome game coming in 2020. If you want to hear some more about that, I'll link the podcast in which we discussed it below. The podcast itself has timestamps in the description, so you can skip to the point in which we talked about it. But Rogue, for what it is just very okay. It's very short, it doesn't achieve much, and the parts that are fun tend to be very short-lived. It's great in concept, but like I said, in execution, it doesn't quite live up to what it could have been. Once upon a time, this was my least favourite game. Perhaps not just in terms of Assassin's Creed, but perhaps my least favourite game of all time. A lot of the disappointment came from the very messy plot, which maybe had too many hands in the pot, causing it to feel quite incoherent and all over the place. The glitches that were prominent on day one, and just because you didn't experience them doesn't mean they weren't there. The frame rate issues, the characters popping in, the main issues with Unity could have been ironed out if the game had another year or so in development, but it didn't, and so we're left with what we got. The base concept of Unity is one of my favourites of the franchise. Joining the Brotherhood, which in Paris at the time was very bureaucratic, the hierarchy was very reminiscent of Assassin's Creed 1 that gave that flair we hadn't seen since the first game. The use of only a single hidden blade, the emphasis on hiding in the shadows and blending with people, it truly wanted the player to feel like an assassin the way that no previous Assassin's Creed game had. As the game stands today, it offers a lot of what it wanted to begin with. The issue is that it's held back by the game still being buggy in some areas, and the story remaining stale, confusing, and sometimes drawn out. But what it does manage to deliver on are some things I think are fantastic. The level system is not done in the traditional numbered leveling, but in assassin ranks. The customization to make your Arno look how you want. You can choose to tackle things stealthy or go in and kill everyone, and both options take skill and are up to you. The way the black box mission assassinations are structured are incredibly fun and open, and genuinely the best assassinations of the franchise. Unity as a concept is potentially the best Assassin's Creed has ever been, at least from the perspective of allowing you to feel like you are an assassin. In execution, however, you're left wanting. Although it delivers on some of these promises now the game is patched, it's still incredibly poor. The customization is extensive, but the items usually look awful, and so you end up looking like a mismatched mess. The story, like I said, is all over the place, and Arno can go from being interesting to being outright irritating. The love plotline was totally ballsed up from the very start, and the game just has this feel of slow, sluggish clunkiness to it that I can't shake. Despite all of this, the game offers a lot more in retrospect than I thought it did when it first launched, and although it doesn't live up to a lot of its predecessors, I think it deserves some credit, even if just for its vision. I absolutely love Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. This game could easily be considered one of the best of its generation, and it's certainly one of the very best games to come out of Ubisoft, especially in recent years. The ambition shown by the team and by Ashraf Ismail is incredibly obvious when playing this game. From the scenery to the smooth gameplay to the huge ship battles and diverse environments, the sense of exploration and discovery, Black Flag always has something to offer, and it's easily one of the best open worlds I've ever played in. The story itself is also incredibly well crafted and does a majority of characters justice, especially the protagonist Edward Kenway. Darby McDevitt wrote a fantastic narrative with this game, as he always does, and every line of dialogue is delivered with such expertise, not just in the writing but in the acting too. I love this story, I love its world and its characters, but it's not without fault. The biggest issue I have with Black Flag is that the mission structure, specifically within the main story, is incredibly tedious, with a lot of tailing missions, both on land and in your ship. It's the opposite of exciting. It's a very odd juxtaposition with the story being so good, but the actual missions themselves being incredibly underwhelming for the most part. That being said, there's plenty of enjoyable missions, and the side content is diverse and interesting, with not just missions but locations which aren't mandatory to the main plot, meaning you have so many places to go, things to do, locations to explore, and secrets to discover. This game really shines gameplay-wise outside of the main story. All in all, Black Flag is an incredible game that still holds up today as one of my all-time favorites, but there's just those few things that drag it down in this particular list, not to mention the modern day being pretty boring and sucking you out of the stuff you actually find fun. Overall, this game is one I still recommend time and time again to people, as it's a killer standalone game. This rendition of Ezio's family is still one of my all-time favourites, probably due to the amount of emotional connection it conveys from Ezio to Bayek, allowing it to feel like a true, well-earned connection from this origin story to the roots of the franchise in Altair and Ezio's heavily entwined narrative. Origins was a breath of fresh air when it released back in 2017. We've been stuck with games like Assassin's Creed 3, Unity, Rogue, Syndicate, with only Black Flag being a memorably good experience, and getting to step into a game like Origins was breathtaking, especially from the perspective of where Assassin's Creed had been. Seeing the game be reinvented from the ground up, but still somewhat keep the core elements of its identity, was wonderfully done in some areas, and maybe not so well done in others. The removal of social stealth and the black box assassination missions are some of the things that still irk me about Origins, just because it took away major elements of what made Assassin's Creed Assassin's Creed. But Origins itself kept enough AC-type elements to win me over and allow me to appreciate it for what it was, and with a story that kept me interested, a world that was vast, gorgeous and diverse, and a protagonist that's one of my all-time favourites, I feel it did the origin story of the Brotherhood justice. The side quests in Origins were very hit and miss, however, with a lot of them simply being vague story to allow you to enter an enemy camp and rescue someone from prison. Similarly to Black Flag, some of the mission structure was very boring and repetitive, not quite as much so, but it did suffer from a few of the same issues in that regard. That being said, there were so many side quests that a ton of them were memorable, and some even added more context to the main narrative, and I really liked that attention to detail. I think one of the major things that stops Origins from being even higher up on this list is just due to the fact that it's very surface level in terms of an origin story. It doesn't do anything egregiously bad, but it also doesn't go deep enough. Assassin's Creed 1 to Revelations was very proud to explore its lore and the philosophy of the Assassins. You'd think an origin story would have the same approach, but it didn't. We didn't get very deep into the philosophical ponderings we got to see from Altair and Ezio, which to a lot of people and partially to myself allowed Origins to feel somewhat superficial when compared to the first 4 games of the franchise. It was almost scared to delve into its own lore, and that's due to trying to appeal to everyone rather than making a game from the heart for the fans, and I don't doubt that that was due to the higher-ups at Ubisoft pushing the game to be more simplified. With that being said, Origins is a spectacular game, and I'll never not love the experience and the joy it brought to such a disillusioned AC fan such as myself. Coming up on 12 years since the release, and this game still continues to hold a very special place in my heart. Whereas most people got into the Assassin's Creed franchise with Assassin's Creed 2, I've been with it from the very start. I remember seeing trailers for Assassin's Creed and just being so interested. The setting was something I loved, the combat with swords was something I'd never really seen, and the fact that you could fully explore these huge, old cities and walk the streets, climb any building, it truly blew me away. This was my very first game on that generation of consoles, and still to this day I'm impressed by the detail in some of the structures or the layout of the cities. The social stealth system was implemented so well, and very rarely do you encounter any bugs, and even then they're small. Assassin's Creed was the foundation of what became one of my favourite stories of all time. From Altair's subtle storytelling through dialogue and gameplay to Desmond's mysterious plot in his small chamber at Abstergo Industries. This first game held so much intrigue to me, had so much depth with which to explore in terms of narrative, but also in terms of gameplay. The game was almost built so that players could pick up and enjoy, but if you spent a long time with it, you'd be able to parkour faster and more efficiently. You'd be able to pull off combos faster in combat and so on. The game was clearly a passion project and something that could have developed into an all-time classic if it was allowed to be in the control of the original creator, and something that to this day could have been looked back on as one of the best series to date, telling a narrative that was made for the fans and was wrapped up nicely without the need for 12 games, 8 comics, mobile apps, animated shorts, Hollywood movies, and so on. The main thing holding back Assassin's Creed to me is the repetitive nature. Now to me, the structure of Assassin's Creed 1 has become something like muscle memory to me, so I can easily speed through the investigations and play each assassination relatively quickly and enjoy the parts that I love, but I can see objectively how this repetitive nature could be incredibly irritating for people, and I think that's why most people wouldn't have had it so high on their list. But for me, I think everything works so well so that I can overlook some of the repetitiveness of the gameplay and the linear nature of the story at times. Because to me, Assassin's Creed is very special. It was clearly a game made from the heart and made not for everyone, but made simply for people who wanted to like it. And it wasn't trying to please everyone. It didn't treat its audience like idiots, it was subtle in its storytelling, it was open with its gameplay, and it was trying to be its own thing. It was trying to be Assassin's Creed, rather than being every other popular game on the market. And that's what comes from creative developers like Patrice Désilets at the helm, and for those reasons, it's earned this spot on my list. Well, we're in the top 3 now, fellas. There's only 3 games left, but which order do I feel they deserve to be? Let's see. Assassin's Creed Revelations was the climax of Ezio and Altair's stories, so heavily entwined with Desmond since the franchise's inception, and I couldn't think of a better way to end this narrative arc. Darby McDevitt forged a true masterpiece in storytelling with Revelations, and I stand by this game being the greatest Assassin's Creed story of all time. Where it may fall short in its world and gameplay when compared to other games, it more than makes up for it in its superb storytelling, which is written from the heart with love and care for the fans of this story and for the fans of this series. It doesn't pull its punches, it doesn't dance around its lore, it fully embraces what Assassin's Creed is, and it fully embraces who these characters are and the journeys they've been on over the past 5 years worth of games, and completes their stories in the most incredible yet subtle way possible. Desmond doesn't enter Altair's library to find Altair wandering out in a suit at the ripe age of 1,000. Desmond enters Altair's library through the conduit who is Ezio. Ezio doesn't find Altair but finds his skeleton, which had been sitting there for hundreds of years. And although Desmond, Ezio and Altair are all hundreds of years apart from each other, through the subtlety in Darby's writing, through the shifts in music, and through the smart camera work, these 3 characters whose stories have been intrinsically linked since the first game in the series feel closer than ever, and you feel this sense of shared history and shared struggle, and even though none of the 3 really knew each other, you get this sense that they did, and that's all done not just by Darby's masterful writing, but the development development leading up to that moment due to the 3 games which came before it. For this moment alone, I could rank the game here, but there's so many other moments, from Ezio's letters to Claudia, the relationship between him and Sophia, the little cryptic moments between Subject 16 and Desmond, along with getting to play as Altair, seeing little snippets into his life, a character that was 4 years old at this point, and they still revisited him. Revelations is made how every game should be, how God of War was made, how Red Dead Redemption 2 was made. It embraces its past, embraces its lore, and uses those things to create a narrative that doesn't try to please everyone, but tries to please the people who have been invested in what came before it, and I hugely respect that. Revelations, however, of course, has some issues. Although the narrative is near perfection, there are some gameplay elements that drag it down. The world itself to me isn't as interesting as Rome, and the Assassin Templar storyline feels shoehorned in, which it probably was, given I'm certain Darby wanted to write about Altair's library, the Masyaf keys, along with Sophia and Ezio, but Ubisoft likely made him throw in some Templars to make it an epic action game too. The diversity in side quests that we saw in Brotherhood is also absent from this game, and the tower defense, although I find any form of tower defense fun, it's tedious and I don't really see why it was in the game. All in all, Revelations is a brilliant game to me, and replaying it is always a delight, despite its flaws. Now for the top 2. I feel as though you all might know in which order these will go, but it might come as a shock. Assassin's Creed 2 was for the longest time my favourite of the Assassin's Creed games, and then began fluctuating between Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. I would just say, both of them, depending on the day, it might change. But have decided to come to a full conclusion, and although there isn't much between them, I feel Brotherhood is the better game. But for now, let's talk about Assassin's Creed 2. Assassin's Creed 2 takes what Assassin's Creed 1 did well and improves on it. Everything it doesn't do well, it does away with, and adds new elements which are exclusive to Assassin's Creed 2. This game doesn't just feel like a sequel in terms of gameplay and story, it feels like a sequel in every single way. This isn't just the next chapter of Desmond's story. Altair isn't just forgotten, he's crucial to the narrative, to both the development of Ezio and of Desmond. With Desmond constantly bringing him up, with Altair being talked about by Mario, with his special armor being unlockable and his codex pages bringing knowledge to Ezio, he's also playable for a small section when Desmond ends up falling into his ancestors' memories without meaning to due to the bleeding effect. This was a time when Assassin's Creed games weren't self-contained, but each game was incredibly present in the next, with it being a huge main plot point that's something that Assassin's Creed 2 does with ease. This was also the introduction of my favourite fictional character of all time in Ezio Auditore. His development over the course of this game was something I admire, and seeing him grow over the years we play as him is marvellously well written. The story is always intriguing, be it Ezio's personal quest for revenge, the lore behind the assassins in this time and how Ezio fits into that, or the elements regarding the first civilization and the pieces of Eden, which comes to an exciting climax as the game ends. The pacing is great as long as you discount the DLC chapters, which can affect pacing significantly, but without them this game flows so well from story beat to story beat, never makes a moment boring, each character is memorable and important to the development of Ezio and the overall plot. Each city is built beautifully and each feels individual with the colour palette, the architecture and the soundtrack. Wandering the streets of Florence at night feels entirely different from running on the rooftops of Venice during the day, and these small things make it all the more convincing. Side content in this game is fine, it's serviceable, but beyond the assassin tombs there's nothing really too memorable. Just races, beat up events and minor assassinations. I feel this is where the game can fall slightly below the rest of the game's average. Similarly to the first game, the open world can feel very linear at times, with the best parts being the story missions and not a lot of that being shared to the side content. Assassin's Creed 2 will forever be one of my all-time favourite games, and it did something that not a lot of games these days can pull off in terms of a sequel, especially from Ubisoft. Keeping everything tonally consistent, the story relevant, and the lore interesting. Assassin's Creed 2 was, and still is to me, a masterpiece.
Roma.
I don't think anyone ever expects to wake up one morning and find themselves caught in the middle of a war between two secret organizations. I know I didn't. But here I am. On one side are the Templars.
I know you're there, Ezio! The Pope told me about you and your little group of assassins.
They won't stop until every single one of us serves them. Literally. Fighting against them are the assassins.
The liberation of Roma has begun. If you choose to flee, do so now. But if you choose to fight, stand with me against the Borgia.
A group dedicated to safeguarding humanity's free will.
Lees Eowakan Motlak, the Kulun Mumkin. The wisdom of our creed is revealed through these words. Our belief in humanity rests at the heart of the Assassin Brotherhood.
You are the leader of the assassins now. Unite them, Ezio Auditore, and take back Roma.
Chains will not hold me!
Think about all that you've been through in the last month. 74 days is a long time.
What if I can't stop the visions? How long before I start painting symbols on the walls?
I know it's difficult, but try to compartmentalize, Desmond. Focus on the present.
I am with you till the end. Find me in the darkness.
Insieme per la vittoria!
I will not die by the hand of man!
1419, 1420, 1421. What if they aren't dates? What's happening? I can't move. Let me go!
Stay your blade from the flesh of an innocent. Hide in plain sight. Never compromise the Brotherhood. These are the tenets of our creed. May they guide you in life and in death.
Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is the best Assassin's Creed game. Let me try to explain why. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood understands perfectly what an Assassin's Creed game needs, and also what a fun open world needs. For a start, the open world is now seamless. It doesn't have loading screens to connect multiple cities. It has one big open world with different regions that vary in landscape, allowing the difference in scenery, but without the need for constantly loading new areas and slowing down player immersion and exploration. It fills this open world with activities for the player to do, either things which complement the story with assassination contracts, assassin recruits to acquire, Borgia towers to destroy, and Leonardo's inventions to track down and destroy, but also with missions that contain their own small narrative, such as the Copernicus conspiracy or the Abstergo agent side missions. On top of this, you have the Thieves questlines, the Courtesans questlines, and the Mercenary questlines. All of these work well to flesh out the open world, the story, and the characters, meaning they've understood what an open world needs in order to be enjoyable to explore and interesting to be in. On top of this, they also nail what an Assassin's Creed game is. They don't compromise the integrity of the story and the brand to make the open world fun. They do them both, and they go hand in hand perfectly. Ezio's story in this game is a very subtle one, and if you want to know more about exactly how well it's written, check out my video essay on Ezio Auditore and why he's my favourite character of all time. I'll link it below. Subtlety is key to Assassin's Creed. It was heavily present in Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 and Revelations. Brotherhood does it perfectly as well, allowing character growth to not be shoved in your face, but subtly done through shifts in dialogue. On top of this, the Assassin's philosophy and ideologies are woven throughout Ezio's actions as he builds the Brotherhood. Again, not shying away from their own lore and instead embracing it for story reasons to great effect. Another part of this is the modern day. The modern day in Brotherhood is peak Assassin's Creed modern day. You cannot do better than they did here. They fully understood what the modern day was meant to be and delivered on it perfectly. The tone is entirely different from Ezio as it is to Desmond. The gang in the modern day have a brilliant dynamic and every interaction is fantastic. On top of this, they have the genuinely interesting narrative which carried over from Assassin's Creed 2, with the warnings for the end of the world along with Abstergo looking for them, giving everything a sense of urgency. The structure to this modern day is very carefully crafted. You play 20 minutes at the start and 20 minutes at the end, and that's all that's mandatory. Other than that, you can play as Ezio uninterrupted for the whole game. But if you're interested in learning more about the story, more about the characters and so on, you can leave the Animus at any point. Talk to people, find mysteries with Eagle Vision, read emails, explore Monteriggioni in the modern day, or find Subject 16 messages from within the Animus. The duality of the two is so fantastically done, and it's something I didn't properly admire until very recently. From a gameplay perspective, there isn't much filler in Brotherhood. The main story is always to the point. There's near to no padding in this game, and every mission feels necessary and interesting, and fun above all else. It also always focuses on key Assassin's Creed traits, such as social stealth, assassinations, protecting people, etc. You always feel like an assassin in Brotherhood. The combat, the customization, the economics and upgrades are all much improved from Assassin's Creed 2 as well. Everything feels like a genuine step up in every single way. I'll always look to Brotherhood as a shining example of what makes Assassin's Creed the best that it can be. From the story and characters to the open world and quest structure, this game offers it all. It's an Assassin's Creed game made for Assassin's Creed fans. I'd love to see this perfectly balanced structure and approach taken on board for the future of the franchise. We all know it won't be, and Ubisoft continues to copy others, but I'd love to see what they did with Brotherhood done again. Show us you still know what Assassin's Creed is, and let that shine. Thanks so much to everyone for watching. Let me know your lists in the comment section below, it'd be interesting to read. Be sure to like and subscribe as well to support the channel. Don't forget to check out other videos that I've linked below that connect somewhat to this one. I'm sure you'll find them all interesting in one way or another. Thanks ever so much everybody, and I'll see you all in the next one.